The Errors of Corbynism. Corbyn is a caring and courageous person. His commitment to standing up for the oppressed is an inspiration to millions. That said, we must be sober when analysing his mistakes and where they come from. Zara was right when she said the Labour Party is dead politically. The truth is that the Labour Party today is the direct result of the party having dead ideas. It's had a fundamentally incorrect approach dominating since its inception, including the Corbyn era, the ideas of reformism. This approach boils down to trying to convince capitalists that socialists are a safe pair of hands by being a safe pair of hands for capitalists, to defend the rich and their interests as a token of goodwill in the hope the ruling class may allow some small reforms without sabotaging us, to dilute socialist ideas and principles enough that they are palatable and permissible. We must completely break with this mentality and incorrect approach. Without the right ideas, without an accurate interpretation of the world, it is impossible to chart a successful path forward. A vital part of this is learning from the errors of Corbynism. Otherwise, we will keep repeating the same errors and keep getting the same results. Your party will only become fit for purpose if the working class make it so. Firstly, we must seriously discuss the lessons from the errors of Corbyn and reformism in general. Then we must put those lessons into practice. It's important to be honest about the fact that it was the politics of Corbyn that directly led to the Labour Party coming firmly under the control of its right wing. This is because Corbyn believed, and still believes, that the capitalist state, the ruling class, the rich, their representatives and press, can be won over to our interests, mainly through compassion and rational persuasion, through compromise, through kind politics, as Corbyn puts it. This is why Corbyn constantly told us to speak politely about and to the Labour right, BBC, Kunzberg, and all other hostile journalists and forces, to be polite and calm. It's why he didn't introduce mandatory reselection or purge the traitors on the right of the PLP when he should have and could have done both. And it's why he apologised over and over again for anti-Semitism instead of saying loudly and clearly that the attacks were a coup, led by the ruling capitalist class here and abroad as part of the international class war. Corbyn should have appealed to the public to get organised for militant action, to engage in the battle. Instead, Corbyn and McDonnell spent enormous energy trying to convince big business, the media and the markets that they were a safe pair of hands, by repeatedly clarifying that they wouldn't do anything that would significantly challenge the status quo. We need to be honest about what happened. Corbyn had the support of millions, especially young people, who were ready to organise and fight for socialism. This enormous energy and potential was often held back and diffused by Corbyn. The relationship between us and the Labour Party leadership was very much one of Corbyn, Momentum and his team telling us what to do, not Corbyn implementing the demands of the membership, which were generally to go further, to fight harder and apologise less. Many people correctly conclude that Corbyn was sabotaged through brutal character assassinations and smears, internal Labour Party sabotage and the Israel lobby, etc. However, often the same people conclude that if Corbyn had somehow got into Downing Street, then it would have been a success, introducing socialist policies through Parliament. The attacks that caused Corbyn to capitulate would not have stopped if he'd entered government, but increased exponentially. So long as you accept the laws and the logic of capitalism and Parliament, you accept its limitations. To get an idea of how Corbyn would have behaved as PM, then look no further than Syriza or Podemos, who did get into government. I also highly recommend the film A Very British Coup, which expertly depicts the pressures Corbyn would have faced. Liz Truss, for example, was rapidly removed for jeopardising the stability of international profiteering. There's no reason to think Corbyn would have been spared the lettuce treatment. Our potential lies in a worker state, not in managing and fixing capitalism. There has never and could never be a version of capitalism that isn't reliant on exploitation and suffering at one pole, whilst profits accumulate at the other. Corbyn should have made clear that the attacks were because the rich were trying to prevent the working class from rising up and potentially even ending this predatory system. That's what they feared, not Corbyn himself, but the potential that the working class may go beyond Corbyn. Our strength lies in the workplace, in our communities, not in Westminster. The situation for the oppressed globally is deadly serious. We need to be equally serious in our analysis and approach. Hope alone is not enough, neither is simply voting for socialists. we must pursue the politics that actually lead to socialism. So what are the specific politics of Corbyn? He follows a Bennite tradition of reformism. Ultimately, reformists like Corbyn think that if you say the right thing to the right people, you can sneak in socialism via the back door. They believe that if we elect enough socialists, then slowly but surely they will introduce more and more socialist policies until eventually we have socialism. This sounds peaceful and smooth, yet this has been tried hundreds of times in countless countries and never once succeeded, not even with breaking with capitalism, never mind delivering socialism. The ruling class does not easily tolerate even the most minor challenges to profit. Their existence depends on this defiance, with the capitalist state and parliament developed to ensure this. A prime example is Allende in Chile, whose politics Corbyn is particularly fond of, ironically. The issue is that so long as the capitalist state remains intact, any reform given today can be taken back tomorrow. And as a backup, the state, CIA, World Bank, IMF, etc., can forcefully remove a government and are well practiced in doing so, if the socialist government aren't prepared to go all the way. Remember when education and healthcare was completely free and we had strong union rights? British politics has largely been defined by reformism, and this approach hasn't made significant gains in decades. This is because the concessions of the post-war period were only granted due to unique factors that no longer exist. Keynesianism was an attempt by the rich to save capitalism following the unprecedented destruction of World War II. Many forget that Keynes was a capitalist, one who famously said, "The class war will find me on the side of the educated bourgeoisie." The unique temporary factors that made Keynes's ideas both possible and popular following World War II were an economic upswing, the Marshall Plan, profit and looting from the empire, a shortage of workers creating exceptional demand and bargaining power, and linked to this enormous destruction of private property that needed rapid rebuilding, cheap debt, and pressure from British workers to have the same privileges as the workers in the USSR. And last but not least, a fear from the ruling class that the working class soldiers who'd been fighting for democracy might actually want genuine democracy and be prepared to fight for it. Today, there is neither the economic upswing nor any of the other key pressures and factors required for Keynes-style reforms, such as those post-World War II. There's fundamental reasons why austerity, not investment, is generally on the cards across the West. In short, the reformist approach was only able to yield results for a very short window of time, based on a confluence of very unique historic factors. This critical fact is something reformists routinely overlook. It is not possible to turn back the clock as many wish. Our only choice is in how we move forward, and whether we stick to dead-end reformist politics or aim for the fundamental change the global situation demands. The critical lesson of Corbynism is that we must go on the offensive to meet our aims, specifically along class lines. Ultimately, we need to prepare the working class to take power, to take our destiny into our own hands. Elected leaders who aren't in keeping with what is necessary should be rapidly removed. We cannot cling to leaders simply because they are amiable, honest, or good orators. They must also have the fundamental ability and perspective to deliver a socialist transformation. When we are attacked by the media, we must not go on the defensive, apologizing as we retreat, but counterattack. Ultimately, we must engage in the class war. It is a fight to the death, and we should treat it as such. What the systemic crisis calls for is radical fundamental change. Anything less will mean sleepwalking into a nightmare. What is made evident only by a clear analysis is that the class war cannot be won via compromise. Any displays of weakness by the working class and its leaders will be seen as weak points to attack, such as with anti-Semitism and Corbyn's so-called kind politics. Our enemy is ruthless and cannot be won over by moral appeals or rational persuasion. The interests of the ruling capitalist class are diametrically opposed to ours. The class war can only be settled by a defeat of the ruling class or the destruction of civilization. Either capitalism kills us, or we overthrow the capitalist class and introduce a rationally and democratically planned, centralized economy, socialism. Any attempt to reach a middle ground, which is simply impossible since only one class can come out on top, will instead lead to increasing horrors too disturbing to seriously ponder. Instead, we must do everything we can to avoid living in an apocalyptic future. The fact is that only the working class as a whole can be trusted to organise and run the economy in our collective interests. It's evident the capitalists would rather the planet burn than give up their power and privilege, so why tolerate them? Workers already know how to run the workplace and the economy better than the elite, and often recognise this fact. The working class is full of ideas on how resources and facilities could be put to far better use than today. Our goal is to put people in control of their workplace, environment, and communities, unleashing human potential by building a new society from the bottom up, where we unite nationally and internationally in our common goals of dramatically improving the lives of billions of oppressed. Only then can we begin to build a world based on collaboration, peace, and prosperity. In the immediate term, we must defend our class, especially the most vulnerable, by forming local community defence organisations. Critically, this is something Corbyn has never once called for. He prefers to rely on the police and leave physically defending our communities to the same state forces that brutalise and persecute us. He wants to reform the police and courts, not abolish and replace them as we must. History has proven that an organised and militant working class is the only force that can defeat the far right. This is what ended the pogroms last year, and this is what must end them again. In this struggle is a glimpse of our revolutionary potential, of what happens when we unite and organise ourselves according to need, not profit. So in terms of the revolutionary potential and the glimpses of that, the summer before last, there was the mobilisation against the far right in Old Market. I'd say the key takeaways from that day, the key lessons were, one, I saw so many people who aren't fighting people. They don't normally engage in politics or anything like that. But there was this real sense of, I'm willing to put myself on the line to defend the communities. This has gone too far. I'd say there was also, very significantly, the police put out a public order that nobody could wear balaclavas or face masks or anything so they could film and monitor us. But, many people did. And the police were powerless to do anything about it. They looked shy and bashful all day, and that's because they weren't in charge. For that day, it was the community that was keeping our streets safe. The police and the courts were meaningless. I'd say another key factor of that day in terms of showing the glimpses of our revolutionary potential was how many youth came out ready to defend their communities, again, ready to fight. What I saw was young revolutionaries who perhaps aren't, politically engaged, but yeah, they're really ready to fight in the struggle and to do what is necessary. But our aim should not only be to limit the damage of this barbaric divide and conquer system, which causes one section of the working class to resent another, but our aim must be to build a society where no person has the ability to exploit anyone else, to create the basis for a genuinely liberated existence for all of humanity, not tinker, not continuously plead with the rich for a better compromise, which in fact means begging for crumbs. The time for settling for crumbs is over. In summary, the role of the left is not to defend capitalist democracy and its institutions. It's to reveal their nature, a dictatorship of the rich. Our primary responsibility is to get organised to overthrow capitalism, not to try to fix the unfixable. We cannot afford any more confusion on this matter. Yes, we must fight for reforms, as anything that reduces suffering is welcomed and needed, but we must never sow illusions that capitalism can be reformed into delivering the peace and prosperity that billions of people deserve, or that the ruling class could ever be won over to our position. The interests of those who live from the exploitation of others and those who want to be free of that exploitation can never be reconciled. The capitalist class and their rotten system must be abolished, and we need leaders who understand and loudly proclaim this fact.